just because I really like candles. And I think it really sets a nice tone. And I can see that it's hard to see because of my background. We'll fix that later, I guess. I'm going to share my screen, so it's going to be small in any case, largely because poetry sometimes needs to be read as well as heard. And I think there are things that the authors put into the way they write their poem that really shifts the meaning. And there are 2 poems in this particular series where that's true. So let me share my screen. And the first poem is called Year's End by Richard Wilbur. Now the winter downs the dying of the year, and night is all a settlement of snow. From the soft street, the rooms of houses show a gathered light, a shapen atmosphere like frozen over lakes, whose ice is thin and still allows some stirring down within. I've known the wind by water banks to shake the late leaves down, which frozen where they fell and held in ice as dancers in a spell, fluttered all winter long into a lake. Graved on the dark in gestures of descent, they seemed their own most perfect monument. There was perfection in the death of ferns, which laid their fragile cheeks against the stone a million years. Great mammoths, overthrown composedly, have made their long sojourns like palaces of patience in the gray and changeless lands of ice. And at Pompeii, the little dog lay curled and did not rise, but slept the deeper as the ashes rose, and found the people incomplete, and froze the random hands, the loose, unready eyes of men expecting yet another son to do the shapely thing they had not done. These sudden ends of time must give us pause. We fray into the future, rarely wrought, save in the tapestries of afterthought. More time, more time. Barrages of applause come muffled from a buried radio. The New Year bells are wrangling with the snow. I love this poem because it's such a large arc, I think, of thinking about endings in different ways. I don't know how often you have walked in the street on a winter night and had that same experience of seeing the rooms of houses show in a gathered light. And each home seems to hold an atmosphere of the people living in. You get a sense of who they are and what their life must be like. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's just interesting. And I feel a little bit like a peeping Tom in a way, except that it's not, they've left the windows open. So it doesn't feel like I'm forcefully intruding. But still, it's a little discomforting to be so intimately exposed to someone else's life, and yet so interesting. In the world I live in, I don't know about you, everyone's so separate. We rarely share much of our lives with anyone. And there are a few people whose homes I do have the privilege to be in occasionally. And there are other friends who shut me out entirely, not really wanting anyone else in their own home. So it's sort of interesting to think about how we live in this life. And seeing leaves frozen in the water has always been mesmerizing. There is just something precious about seeing that history, that past, kept there for the time that it's kept. It seems to just bring back those memories of spring and summer, the beauty of the trees when they were in full leaf. And now that the leaves are fallen and frozen in the ice, they still are there as memories. Indeed, their own most perfect monument. And then thinking of the artifacts of past years that we have been blessed to discover in terms of prehistoric times, and know that there was another time, a time way before us, when life lived and enjoyed the sun and the breeze. And they've left their memories, their parts of themselves for us to discover. That's such a gift, actually, to be able to see that, not with fear, but with a deep appreciation for the lives they lived and struggled with, just as we do. And the sadness of Pompeii. The dog I've seen at Pompeii was not curled, I don't believe. So maybe there was more than one dog tied and forgotten in the panic and the rush of the volcanic action in Pompeii. But it does speak very much to what happens when we become fearful and how easy it is to forget others in that time, to feel that it's more important to take care of ourselves. And one has to wonder whether that dog's masters actually escaped or not, whether leaving the dog gave them enough time to get out or not. How do the animals around us understand the catastrophes that we all engage in? Flitting through my mind right now are the 200 and some odd birds a day that get killed by hitting the glass in the skyscrapers in New York during migrations. I mean, what an incredible waste. And you have to think there's something we could do about that if we but cared enough to stop that damage. It really touches for me on our willingness to accept the responsibility for taking care of other life around us. And whether we do that or whether that's an afterthought. And then he ends with the prosaic buried radio and New Year's bells. How much they coexist, the profound and the prosaic at the same time. Such an interesting thing to hold, don't you think? So the next poem is called Burning of the Old Year. And both of these come from the Poetry Foundation website. So I thank them for the privilege. Burning the Old Year by Naomi Shihab Nye. Letters swallow themselves in seconds. Notes, friends tied to the doorknob, transparent scarlet paper, sizzle like moth wings, marry the air. So much of any year is flammable. Lists of vegetables, partial poems, orange swirling flames of days. So little is a stone. Where there was something and suddenly isn't, and absence shouts, celebrates, leaves a space. I begin again with the smallest numbers. Quick dance, shuffle of losses and leaves. Only the things I didn't do crackle after the blazing dies. So here we start with the prosaic, the ethereal things in our life that come and go, that have only moments of life in our life, moments of reality. And they marry, M-A-R-R-Y, the air. And you could take that word both ways, I think, and M-E-R-R-Y as well. But here it's necessary to see the written word to understand what the poet meant. So much of any year is flammable. It's almost an homage to the prosaic, don't you think? And that's so true. So much of our life is ethereal, disappears, seems to have no larger meaning. And yet it's the major context in which we exist. Certainly that is food for thought. How important are the little things? And is it stone that makes it important? Is it the durability, the long lastingness that makes things important? Sometimes things are so fleeting, and yet they carry a depth of meaning that transcends the years. Transcends the years. My mind just went back to a time in Oakland, actually. It was in the year after the suicide of my son. And my grief was so deep and so permeated me. And I was walking, I was walking down the street in Oakland, and a Black man came up to me and just touched me. And with that touch, he took that pain. And when he took that pain, it was so amazing. I've been so grateful for that experience for 20 years, I guess, or more. It was such a kindness. And I do believe it was so consciously done. So it was a brief moment. And yet it saved my life in lots of ways, where there was something and suddenly isn't. And absence shouts, celebrates, and leaves a space. That's certainly true of the death of my son, and it's certainly true of the loss of the grief. Such an interesting way of thinking about our everyday experience of life. And she ends with the cackle after the blazing dies, only the things I didn't do, how we beat ourselves up for what we haven't accomplished instead of cheering what we actually have done. So I'm going to read the last poem, which is actually one of mine. And this is another where seeing what the poet meant, I think, helps to deepen the understanding. So Remember by Catherine Alexander, M.A. Remember to put together recognize connections, the hidden wholeness that sustains. Remember to put together what has been dismembered in our haste, in our ignorance, and in our fear. Remember the hidden wholeness, Spirit's gift. That's what all these poems have been about for me, is to recognize the connections and the hidden wholeness that truly does sustain us in life. It is sometimes the pain that connects, it is sometimes the joy, and sometimes it's the curiosity, the not knowing that actually sustains and connects us. Our emotions are such a key to what's been important to us in the experiences, transient or monumental, that we have experienced in our life. And we need to remember how to put back together what has been dismembered or disconnected from us and from our understanding as we proceed. And when we do, that hidden wholeness just sort of shines, and you begin to see how things are of a piece, and even the little things are important. So thoughts. Yes. So I will put these poems up along with the video, so you can download them if you'd like. And you're free to comment if you'd like.
Catherine, can you
Yes.
hear me? This is Peggy.
Yes. Hi, Peggy.
Hi. I came in on kind of late, but I'm just grateful that you're going to post the poems. To just held space for meaning of
Yes.
in the busyness of life. So I'm grateful for you for that. And yeah, it is only in the pause that we can feel ourselves in the wholeness, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't reflect much. I think that's one of the gifts of poetry, is that it stops us, holds us for a few minutes to let us reflect, reconnect.
Yes. And remember, I love that. I started that a few years ago, where whenever I write the word remember, I always hyphenate it, remember. And so my heart joins yours in celebrating that right now.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Yes. Such a lovely day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Just a minute.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Oh, you're more than welcome.